At 3:14 a.m., my garage was engulfed in flames. By the time I stumbled outside in bare feet, smoke burning my lungs and sweat freezing on my back, everything I'd built for 15 years was already collapsing. My workshop, my tools, my vintage Mustang I restored bolt by bolt after work every night, gone in under 8 minutes. The fire chief called it electrical. My security camera called it arson. Across the street, HOA President Delilah Harrington stood in her robe, arms folded, watching the fire like it was a late-night show. No shock, no panic, just that quiet, satisfied stare. That same afternoon, she walked into a courthouse for her arraignment, confident, smirking, absolutely certain she'd beaten this. The clerk called the case. Delilah looked up at the bench for the first time, and the color drained from her face. Stay with me, because what happened next forced the woman who burned my life down to beg for mercy from the one man she never expected to face. My name is Marcus Thornfield, and 6 months ago I was just a newly appointed municipal judge trying to start fresh after a messy divorce. At 52, I figured I'd seen everything the legal system could throw at me after 15 years as a public defender. Boy, was I wrong. I'd just bought a house in Willowbrook Estates, and before you picture some fancy mansion, let me stop you right there. This place was basically overpriced tract homes with pretentious street names like Manor Way and Estate Drive. The kind of neighborhood where people lease BMWs they can't afford and act like they invented suburbia. But here's why I chose that particular house. It had this massive garage, perfect for my weekend hobby of restoring classic cars and woodworking. After years of apartment living, the smell of fresh sawdust mixing with autumn leaves as I unloaded my table saw from the moving truck, pure heaven. That peace lasted exactly 3 days. Day 3. I'm setting up my workshop when I hear this particular brand of authority approaching. You know the sound. Click, click, click of acrylic nails on a clipboard, accompanied by a smile sharper than my best chisel set. Welcome to Willowbrook. I'm Delilah Harrington, HOA President. I'm sure you'll want to review our community standards before you settle in. Delilah was 47, a former real estate agent who'd lost her license over what she called misunderstandings, but what sounded more like fraud to my trained ear. She handed me a 47-page document with sections highlighted in yellow like a law student's textbook. Particularly pages 23 through 31 regarding garage usage, noise ordinances, and appropriate vehicles for display. That metallic snap of her phone camera became the soundtrack to my introduction to Willowbrook. She was already documenting everything. The expensive but flimsy feel of those CC&R papers should have been my first clue. All show, no substance like everything else about this place. But I figured I'd dealt with worse in courtrooms, right? I'm sure in your previous neighborhood, these standards might seem strict, she continued, but property values here are very important to those of us who've invested properly. That pause before previous neighborhood told me everything. This wasn't about rules. This was about who belonged and who didn't. I explained that my 1967 Mustang project car was registered, insured, and properly covered. My garage workshop was fully enclosed, and I only worked during permitted hours. Reasonable response to reasonable concerns, right? Wrong. "Oh, you're one of those homeowners," Delilah said, her voice dripping with the kind of fake sweetness that makes your teeth hurt. "Well, Mr. Thornfield, you'll find that here in Willowbrook, we have ways of maintaining our standards." As she clicked away in her designer heels, I noticed her taking photos of everything, my garage, my car, even my mailbox placement. The way she handled that phone, documenting every angle like she was building a case, should have set off every alarm bell in my legal training. But you know what? After 15 years of defending people against actual criminals, I figured I could handle one suburban wannabe dictator with a clipboard and an attitude problem. Looking back, that overconfidence was my first mistake. Because Delilah Harrington wasn't just your average power-drunk HOA president. She was something much more dangerous. A petty tyrant with just enough intelligence to be creative and just enough desperation to be reckless. That night, sitting in my garage workshop with the familiar weight of a wood plane in my hands, I had no idea I was about to enter a 3-year war that would end with federal charges, insurance fraud, and the most satisfying moment of my judicial career. The metallic hiss of the plane shaving curls from a piece of oak was peaceful. Too peaceful. because Delilah was already planning her first move. 2 weeks later, the harassment began with surgical precision. Violation letter number 1 arrived on expensive letterhead that screamed, "I'm important." Unauthorized storage of non-street legal vehicles. The irony? My Mustang was fully registered, insured, and street legal. I could have driven it to their office if I wanted to make a point, but here's what I learned from my public defender days. Bullies bank on you not fighting back. They count on intimidation working better than actual authority. So I responded with documentation. Photos, registration papers, insurance certificates, all time-stamped and organized like I was filing a motion in federal court. Delilah's response wasn't backing down. Oh no, she scheduled a compliance inspection and showed up with backup. Her neighbor Patricia, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, and her brother-in-law Randy, who apparently worked in property management. Translation: he was a failed real estate agent just like his sister-in-law. The smell hit you first. Delilah's cheap perfume mixing with Randy's cologne created this assault on your senses that somehow perfectly matched their personalities, like someone had bottled entitlement and desperation in equal parts. They nitpicked everything. The color of my mailbox, it was black. CCNRs said dark colors acceptable. My lawn height, 2.8 inches when they claimed maximum was 2.5. Even the brand of my doormat was apparently non-standard materials. I'm standing there watching Randy scratch violations onto his clipboard while Patricia nervously cleared her throat every time she clearly disagreed but wouldn't speak up. The guy was literally measuring grass with a ruler. Now, here's something every homeowner should know. Most HOA harassment relies on you not understanding your rights. These people were banking on intimidation, not actual authority. I started photographing everything with metadata timestamps and keeping detailed logs. Documentation beats desperation every single time. But they were particularly interested in my garage workshop setup. Kept asking about fire safety compliance and electrical modifications like they were building inspectors instead of wannabe suburban dictators. 2 weeks later, violation letter number 2. Unauthorized structural modifications to the garage. They claimed my workbench and tool storage violated building codes. Here's where my legal training kicked in. I spent a weekend at City Hall pulling permits and building records. Turned out the house's previous owner, a contractor, had properly permitted all garage improvements 5 years ago. The feeling of those old blueprint papers between my fingers, official city stamps and inspector signatures, was like holding ammunition. My response letter didn't just refute their claims. It included copies of all permits, building inspector sign-offs, and a friendly paragraph pointing out that filing false building code violations is a misdemeanor in our state. Delilah's response came within 24 hours instead of her usual 2-week power play delay. The typing was sloppy, clearly rushed. I'd rattled her, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. The board will be conducting more frequent compliance reviews given your confrontational attitude toward community standards. That word, confrontational. Because asking for basic fairness was confrontational. Because expecting them to follow their own rules was confrontational. That night, sitting in my garage workshop, the familiar weight of my tools felt different. The sound of metal on wood as I sharpened my chisels wasn't just preparation for weekend projects anymore. I was preparing for war. And Delilah? She was about to learn that terrorizing a public defender turned judge was like bringing a clipboard to a federal court hearing. The scratch of her pen on violation notices was about to become evidence in a criminal case. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that this woman had made my peaceful retirement home into a battlefield, and I was done playing defense. The next morning, I found her measuring my driveway with a tape measure, taking notes like she was planning something that required precise measurements. When I asked what she was doing, she claimed she was investigating potential encroachment on common areas. The careful way she documented every inch of my property, the focus on my garage's proximity to the property line, the way she kept glancing at the main electrical panel, it all suggested she wasn't planning another lawsuit. She was planning something that required intimate knowledge of my property layout, something physical, something permanent, something that would require knowing exactly where my garage sat in relation to everything else. The metallic snap of her measuring tape retracting echoed in my driveway like a countdown timer. But a countdown to what? Months 3 and 4 was when Delilah stopped pretending this was about community standards. Her new tactic? filing noise complaints with the city about my weekend woodworking. She claimed I was violating noise ordinances, even though I only worked from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturdays, the exact same hours when leaf blowers, lawnmowers, and pool parties happened throughout the neighborhood with zero complaints. Officer Rodriguez showed up looking apologetic. "Look, Judge, Mr. Thornfield, I have to respond to complaints, but..." He gestured at my clearly compliant setup, the posted hours, his sound meter reading well below ordinance limits. "Between you and me," Rodriguez said quietly, "repeated false noise complaints can result in fines for the complainant. Just saying, if someone were to document a pattern of harassment..." That was legal trick number 2 handed to me on a silver platter. False police reports are serious business. But Delilah escalated to psychological warfare. She started photographing my property daily, always from public areas, always technically legal, always creepy as hell. The click of her phone camera became the soundtrack to my morning coffee. 14 times in 1 week, according to the security camera system I'd installed. Here's where things got interesting. During a neighborhood barbecue at Patricia's house, I overheard Delilah's real motivation through an open window, the smell of charcoal and lighter fluid mixed with the bitter taste of realization as I heard her say, "People like him think they can just move into our neighborhood and change things. His kind doesn't understand property values. Not homeowners like him, not new residents like him, his kind." Patricia found me after the barbecue, her conscience finally getting the better of her fear. "She's not like this with everyone. The Johnsons converted their garage to a game room without permits, and she called it creative use of space." I went home and did research. White families got friendly reminders about violations. Everyone else got formal violation notices and legal threats. The pattern was clear as day once you knew to look for it. Violation. Letter number 3 arrived like clockwork. Excessive vehicle maintenance activities. Apparently, working on my own car in my own garage violated some obscure clause about commercial activities. Now this is where 15 years of legal training came in handy. I recognized the language immediately. It was copied from a completely different type of HOA in a commercial district 3 states away. Delilah had literally plagiarized the wrong regulations from a random internet search. The smooth, expensive feel of my own legal letterhead as I crafted a response was pure satisfaction. I didn't just refute her claims. I dissected them with surgical precision, pointing out the misapplied statutes and potential liability for harassment. Her response arrived handwritten instead of typed, full of obvious emotional language. "Mr. Thornfield clearly thinks his legal background makes him above community standards." Bingo. She knew I was a judge. This wasn't random harassment anymore. She was specifically targeting me because of my profession. That changed everything from a legal standpoint, adding potential civil rights violations to her growing list of problems. The next morning, all 4 of my car tires were flat. Perfectly legal vandalism. She was standing on public property and could claim she was just checking tire pressure for safety if questioned. But that afternoon, I found her measuring my driveway with a tape measure again, taking detailed notes. When confronted, she claimed she was investigating potential encroachment on common areas. The measuring tape was set up for something bigger. The careful way she documented every inch of my property, focusing on the garage's proximity to the property line and the main electrical panel, suggested she needed precise knowledge of boundaries for whatever she was planning. That night, reviewing security footage, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. During her measuring session, Delilah had spent significant time focused on 2 things: the garage's distance from the property line and the location of my main electrical panel. She wasn't planning another lawsuit. She was planning something physical, something that required knowing exactly where my most valuable possessions were located and how to access the electrical systems that powered them. The hiss of air escaping from my tires that morning wasn't just vandalism, it was reconnaissance. She was testing my response time, my security measures, my willingness to escalate to law enforcement. And I was about to give her more escalation than she bargained for. Because the next phase of her harassment campaign was going to involve actual federal crimes, and I was going to document every single second of it. The click of my phone as I started a voice memo outlining my suspicions wasn't just preparation, it was the beginning of her downfall. Months 5 and 6 was when Delilah made her biggest mistake. She tried to outlawyer a lawyer. Her latest letter arrived via certified mail, copied to an attorney. Notice of intent to seek injunctive relief. against my ongoing violations of community standards. Big words, fancy letterhead, legal-sounding threats that would intimidate most homeowners. But here's legal trick number 3. I recognized the attorney's name, Randy Morrison, Esquire. Her brother-in-law, who'd apparently passed the bar on his 3rd try and specialized in property disputes, which was code for small claims court and tenant evictions. Instead of hiring a lawyer, I represented myself and filed a counterclaim for harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of my civil rights under the Fair Housing Act. Sometimes the best defense is a federal offense. Through legal discovery, I subpoenaed 3 years of HOA records. What I found was a gold mine that would make any prosecutor salivate. Selective enforcement based on race, religion, and profession. Teachers and social workers got friendly treatment. Anyone in law enforcement or legal professions got the full harassment package. The musty smell of old HOA files mixed with Randy's nervous sweating when my discovery requests arrived at their law office, which turned out to be Randy's kitchen table. The satisfying thunk of his briefcase hitting the floor when I dropped the financial audit on that table during our deposition was music to my ears. But the real bombshell was buried in the financial records. Delilah had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, specifically lease payments on that BMW she couldn't afford. Embezzlement is a felony, and she'd left a paper trail that a first-year accounting student could follow. Instead of backing down, Delilah doubled down with the desperation of someone watching their world collapse. She filed a motion claiming I was using my position as a judge to intimidate the HOA board. The irony was perfect. The motion was filed in my own court, but I couldn't hear it due to conflict of interest. It got assigned to Judge Wilson, who'd known me for 10 years and had zero patience for frivolous lawsuits. The crisp feel of real legal documents with actual consequences was so different from Delilah's fake legal HOA letters. These had weight, substance, the power to destroy lives or restore justice. Wilson didn't just dismiss Delilah's motion. He sanctioned Randy for filing frivolous claims and ordered them to pay my legal costs. Between the sanctions and the discovery of embezzlement, Delilah was facing serious legal trouble. But instead of cutting her losses, she escalated to personal destruction. My security cameras caught her and Randy conducting what they thought was covert inspections of my property, measuring distances from my garage to the property line, testing fence stability, examining electrical access points like they were planning a heist. The metallic ping of Delilah's measuring tape retracting became the sound of her desperation. She was looking for any angle, any technical violation that could justify her years of harassment. Randy filed a motion for a professional survey of my property, claiming my garage violated setback requirements. But I'd already ordered my own survey from Earl Henderson, the same company that did the original work. Earl was a 30-year veteran who took one look at the garage and scratched his head. This garage is exactly where it's supposed to be, Judge. Built to code, proper setbacks, everything by the book. That's when Earl made the discovery that turned harassment into felony charges. The property markers had been moved. Fresh concrete around the stakes, slightly different metal composition, and positioning that made my garage appear to encroach by exactly 6 inches. The smell of concrete that hadn't fully cured was evidence any construction professional would immediately recognize. Someone had deliberately moved legal boundary markers to create a false violation. Moving property markers isn't just harassment, it's felony criminal mischief and attempted theft of land. Federal charges with serious prison time. I now had Delilah on embezzlement, harassment, civil rights violations, and felony property tampering. Any reasonable person would surrender and hope for a plea bargain. But Delilah wasn't reasonable. She was desperate, cornered, and about to make the kind of mistake that turns civil disputes into federal criminal cases. My cameras caught her final reconnaissance mission. Late-night inspection of my garage, focusing on the electrical panel and my vintage Mustang. The way she examined the wiring and took detailed photos suggested she wasn't planning another lawsuit. She was planning sabotage, the kind that would destroy what I loved most while giving her plausible deniability. The scratch of her pen taking notes about electrical access points wasn't documentation for legal action. It was planning for destruction. And I was about to let her hang herself with her own rope. Month 7 was when I discovered Delilah's endgame, and it was so much worse than simple harassment. While reviewing HOA financial records for the embezzlement case, I found something that made my prosecutorial instincts scream. Delilah had taken out a substantial insurance policy on common area structures 6 months earlier. The fine print was where it got interesting. The policy included coverage for damage to adjacent structures caused by common area incidents. My garage, being within 50 feet of the community mailbox area, qualified as adjacent. The quiet whir of my printer as I copied page after page of insurance documents was like hearing my own funeral dirge. Each page was more damning than the last. Delilah had been planning insurance fraud from the beginning. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Destroy my garage in a way that looked like an accident originating from common area electrical problems, then collect insurance money to cover the embezzled funds and destroy the evidence of her harassment campaign in one convenient accident. I spent 3 days cross-referencing the insurance policy dates with her harassment timeline. Every escalation, every focus on my garage, every question about electrical safety corresponded perfectly with specific clauses in the insurance policy. The smooth, expensive paper of insurance contracts versus the cheap copy paper of her harassment letters told the whole story. She'd put more effort into planning fraud than she had into hiding her crimes. Email discovery revealed correspondence between Delilah and her consultant, another relative who worked in insurance claims, discussing common area electrical issues and aging infrastructure risks. They'd been planning this for months. From my criminal court experience, I recognized the pattern. Create a legitimate-seeming accident, collect insurance money, blame faulty infrastructure that no one could have predicted. Classic insurance fraud, amateur execution. The acrid smell of electrical components that had been deliberately damaged hit me when I found evidence of tampering with the community mailbox electrical box. Someone had been practicing. The insurance policy had a 6-month waiting period before major claims could be filed. That period ended in exactly 2 weeks. Security footage showed Randy making multiple nighttime visits to the electrical box near my garage, always carrying a small toolbox. The pieces fell into place like dominoes. I discovered Delilah had been buying specific electrical components, surge protectors, copper wire, electrical tape, all items needed to create a faulty wiring scenario that would trigger an electrical fire. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was conspiracy to commit arson and insurance fraud, federal charges carrying serious prison time. But here's where my judicial experience gave me an advantage over my prosecutor instincts. Instead of stopping them immediately, I realized I could catch them in the act with proper preparation and documentation. Let them commit the crimes, document everything, then watch federal prosecutors tear them apart in court. The evidence would be ironclad, the convictions guaranteed, and the sentences substantial enough to send a message to every petty tyrant with a clipboard and a power complex. The decisive click of my phone as I started recording a voice memo outlining my plan wasn't revenge. It was justice served with surgical precision. Note to self, I whispered into the phone. Subject is planning arson and insurance fraud. Timeline is 2 weeks. Coordination with law enforcement begins tomorrow. This isn't about winning an HOA dispute anymore. This is about stopping felons before they destroy property and possibly kill someone, because that's what Delilah had missed in her amateur criminal planning. Electrical fires don't always stay contained. Her plan to destroy my garage could easily spread to neighboring houses. She wasn't just trying to destroy my property anymore. She was risking the entire neighborhood. Time to end this. The week after discovering the insurance fraud plan was like preparing for the most important case of my career. Because that's exactly what it was. First, I needed allies who understood the stakes. Earl Henderson, the surveyor who'd discovered the moved property markers, was furious about the boundary tampering. These amateur criminals think they can fool a professional? I've been doing this for 30 years and I want to see them caught red-handed. Officer Rodriguez was my second recruit. He'd been tracking Delilah's false noise complaints and was eager to nail someone for filing false police reports. I've been waiting for a chance to tag someone for 911 abuse. This woman's been wasting city resources for months. Patricia, the remaining HOA board member, finally grew a spine after seeing the insurance policy. I never signed up to be part of insurance fraud. What she's planning could burn down half the neighborhood. The technical preparation was like setting up a movie production, except the cameras were hidden and the stakes were federal prison time. I installed additional security cameras with night vision and audio recording. The setup looked like normal home security, but created complete surveillance coverage of my garage and all electrical access points. The quiet whir of drill bits as Earl and I installed hidden cameras and weatherproof housings was therapeutic. Each camera position was strategically chosen to capture every angle of the garage, the electrical panel, and the community mailbox area where Randy had been practicing his electrical tampering. For the legal trap, I filed a motion to dismiss all HOA claims against me, citing evidence of harassment and fraud. This put Delilah on a timeline. She needed to act before the legal case exposed everything and brought federal investigators into the picture. Here's something most people don't know about professional arsonists. They create electrical fires by overloading specific circuits to generate heat buildup in wall spaces, then remove the evidence before fire investigators arrive. The process takes about 45 minutes from setup to flashpoint, giving them time to establish alibis while the evidence literally burns up. The bait was perfect in its simplicity. I made a show of planning a weekend camping trip, loading my truck with gear and telling neighbors I'd be gone for 3 days. The perfect opportunity for Delilah to act without witnesses or immediate discovery. But the smell of gasoline and motor oil as I moved my vintage Mustang to Earl's secure garage was bittersweet. No point letting a classic car burn while catching criminals, but having to hide my most prized possession in my own neighborhood felt like surrendering territory to terrorists. Officer Rodriguez provided me with direct communication to the fire department and criminal investigation unit. Soon as you see them tampering with electrical systems, you call this number. We'll have units staged 2 blocks away, response time under 90 seconds. The weight of high-end recording equipment Earl borrowed from his security-conscious contractor friends felt like holding justice in my hands. These devices could capture usable evidence in complete darkness, with audio clear enough for court testimony. We created a mock scenario of exactly what Delilah was planning, testing where she'd need to access electrical systems, how long installation would take, what evidence she'd try to remove afterward. Every detail mapped and prepared for. Patricia, growing more horrified by her discoveries, reached out anonymously to the insurance company to report suspicious policy behavior by the HOA president. That triggered an internal investigation that would make Delilah's fraud attempt federal the moment she filed a claim. The metallic snap of professional-grade evidence bags as I prepared collection procedures sounded like justice being packaged for delivery. Here's a technical detail every homeowner should know. Deliberate electrical tampering leaves specific signatures that trained investigators can identify immediately. Scorch patterns, wire modification marks, component placement that screams intentional overload versus accidental failure. We were ready to identify and document every piece of evidence. I contacted Sarah Martinez, an investigative journalist at the local paper, giving her background without revealing the active investigation. Just wanted you to know there might be a story developing about HOA corruption and insurance fraud. Might want to keep your schedule flexible this weekend. Legal backup plan included sealed evidence packets prepared for delivery to the State Attorney General's office if anything happened to me. If these people are willing to commit arson, escalation to violence isn't impossible. The sharp smell of new electrical components that I planted as additional evidence would clearly demonstrate deliberate tampering versus normal wear when investigators process the scene. The night before my camping trip, Earl, Rodriguez, and I did final walkthrough. Every camera angle checked, every evidence collection point verified, every communication channel tested. The satisfying click of the final camera housing snapping into place sounded like a trap being set, not revenge. Justice served with precision. As I drove away for my fake camping trip, Delilah's bedroom light came on. She'd been watching, waiting for me to leave. The hunt would begin in exactly 18 hours. Friday night, while the neighborhood slept, I was wide awake in Earl's basement workshop monitoring 6 different camera feeds on a laptop setup that would make NSA surveillance teams jealous. The quiet hum of computer fans mixed with distant sounds of neighborhood dogs barking at midnight. The perfect soundtrack for catching federal criminals in the act. 12:47 a.m., Delilah's garage light came on. Security camera caught her loading electrical supplies into a dark backpack. Wire strippers, electrical tape, small cordless drill, surge protector components. She moved with the careful deliberation of someone who'd rehearsed this moment for weeks. Her and Randy conducted a 20-minute safety walk around the neighborhood, checking for lights in windows, cars in driveways, any sign of wakefulness. They were professional enough to be cautious, amateur enough to miss the 6 hidden cameras recording their every move. Enhanced audio picked up Randy's distinctive cologne mixed with Delilah's perfume, an olfactory signature that would be impossible to deny in court testimony. Camera angle 3 captured Randy testing the community electrical box lock with 3 different keys before finding one that worked. Clear evidence of premeditation, prior planning, and breaking and entering community property. The metallic click of the electrical box opening, followed by Randy's whispered, "Got it," provided audio evidence that would make prosecutors salivate. They spent 45 minutes in the electrical box, and the cameras captured Randy installing what appeared to be a modified surge protector designed to create an overload condition. The way he handled the components suggested some knowledge but not expertise. He was following written instructions, not improvising from experience. 2:15 a.m., they packed up and retreated, but the cameras caught something crucial. Delilah dropped a small piece of electrical tape near my garage, physical evidence placing her at the scene with timestamp verification. Saturday morning, I maintained my camping facade with social media posts from Earl's camping location. Actually, photos he'd taken 6 months earlier. Delilah liked one of them within minutes, confirming she was actively monitoring my supposed location. Saturday afternoon, enhanced surveillance picked up Delilah making a phone call from her backyard. "Everything's set for tomorrow night. Make sure you're ready to file first thing Monday morning." I conference called with Rodriguez and fire investigator Captain Morrison, reviewing footage and planning arrest timing. "We need to catch them activating the device, not just installing it," Morrison explained. "Installation could be explained away as maintenance. Activation is attempted arson." The serious click of official evidence documentation sounded like justice being processed through proper channels. Saturday night, Delilah and Randy returned for final preparations. Cameras caught Randy adjusting timing mechanisms on the surge protector, and Delilah placing accelerant-soaked rags in specific locations around my garage. Enhanced footage showed them creating a trail of accelerant designed to ensure maximum damage while making the fire appear to originate from electrical failure. The attention to detail was impressive for amateurs, terrifying for someone whose property was the target. Audio enhancement picked up the distinct smell of lighter fluid as they prepared the accelerant trail, evidence that would demolish any claim of accidental electrical failure. Randy installed a timer device set to activate the electrical overload at exactly 3:30 a.m. Sunday morning, enough time to establish alibis while ensuring maximum damage to my garage and workshop. As they prepared to leave, Delilah made one final phone call to her insurance consultant. "It's done. File the claim Monday at exactly 9 a.m. Remember, it's electrical failure due to aging infrastructure nobody could have predicted." The beep of the call ending was followed by Delilah's satisfied laugh, audio that would haunt her in federal court. Sunday morning, I maintained camping facade while coordinating with law enforcement. Fire trucks were pre-positioned, arrest teams standing by, insurance investigators already aware of the fraud attempt and prepared to document everything. Sunday evening showed normal activity as Delilah and Randy maintained perfect alibis. Dinner with friends, social media posts, creating distance from the pending accident. At 3:25 a.m. Monday morning, cameras captured the exact moment Randy's timer activated. Sparks began in the electrical box, exactly as planned. But instead of watching my garage burn while they collected insurance money and destroyed evidence of their harassment campaign, they were about to discover that their victim had become their prosecutor. As first wisps of smoke appeared from the electrical box, I made the call to Rodriguez. "It's showtime. Move in now." Fire suppression teams were already in position. Instead of fighting a garage fire, they'd be preserving evidence of attempted arson and insurance fraud. The hunt was over. The arrests were about to begin. And Delilah was about to learn that terrorizing a judge carries consequences she'd never imagined. 3:30 a.m. Monday morning was the moment when Delilah's carefully planned crime became her perfectly documented downfall. Instead of letting the electrical fire develop into the garage-destroying inferno she'd planned, fire department crews moved in immediately. They'd been watching the timer countdown and intervened the second the electrical malfunction began. The coordinated whoosh of fire suppression foam being deployed was followed by the sharp crack of Randy's timer device being disabled before it could cause serious damage. Professional firefighters dismantling amateur arson in under 60 seconds. Rodriguez's team had been positioned in unmarked vehicles around the neighborhood since midnight. They moved simultaneously as the fire department secured the scene, a perfectly choreographed law enforcement ballet that would make federal prosecutors proud. 3:47 a.m., Delilah's phone rang. Security footage captured her answering groggily, then snapping awake when she realized the fire had been extinguished immediately instead of burning for hours as planned. Enhanced audio surveillance picked up her panicked voice through bedroom walls. "How did they get there so fast? This wasn't supposed to happen. Someone knew." Officers arrested Randy as he attempted to remove evidence from the electrical box. He was caught red-handed with wire cutters and timer device components, trying to eliminate proof of deliberate sabotage. The smooth plastic of evidence bags felt like justice being packaged for delivery as investigators collected Randy's tools, each one marked with his fingerprints and directly linked to the electrical tampering. Instead of staying home and acting surprised like any innocent person would, Delilah made her fatal mistake. She drove to the scene to check on the emergency. This placed her at the location during active investigation of attempted arson, destroying any claim of innocence. While she was distracted by Randy's arrest, investigators executed a search warrant on her house. They found insurance consultant instructions, accelerant purchase receipts, timing plans, and electrical component shopping lists. The metallic slam of Delilah's car door echoed through the morning air as she realized she'd driven directly into a federal criminal investigation where she was the primary suspect. Fire investigators documented every piece of evidence: modified electrical components, accelerant trails, Randy's timer device, placement of fire-accelerating materials. The chain of evidence was prosecutorial perfection. Investigators noted the distinctive smell of lighter fluid and electrical burning, creating olfactory evidence that matched surveillance audio recordings and Randy's confession about accelerant placement. Realizing he was facing federal arson charges, Randy immediately attempted to flip on Delilah. "This was all her idea. She said it was just insurance money. Nobody would get hurt. I was just following orders." I arrived at the scene, officially returning from my camping trip just as Delilah was being read her rights. The moment she realized the new municipal judge reviewing her case was her intended victim was captured on multiple body cameras. The sharp intake of breath as recognition dawned on her face, followed by her whispered, "Oh shit," was captured with crystal clarity by officer body cameras. The insurance company's fraud investigator arrived with federal agents. Insurance fraud across state lines triggered federal jurisdiction, elevating misdemeanor harassment to federal felony charges carrying serious prison time. Investigators showed Delilah surveillance footage of her and Randy installing electrical devices, preparing accelerant trails, and coordinating timing with insurance claims. Her face went white as she realized every criminal moment had been recorded in high definition. The weight of federal handcuffs being applied to Delilah's wrists was much heavier than local police restraints, symbolizing the serious federal charges she was facing for conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, mail fraud, and civil rights violations. Sarah Martinez, the investigative journalist, arrived with media response to emergency services. She recognized me immediately and understood this was the corruption story I'd hinted about weeks earlier. Patricia arrived and immediately provided additional evidence: embezzlement records, harassment documentation, insurance policy details, and board meeting minutes showing Delilah's increasingly desperate behavior over the past 6 months. The rapid click-click-click of media photographers documenting Delilah's arrest created images that would become the visual representation of HOA corruption and federal overreach consequences. By 6 a.m., Delilah and Randy were facing federal charges: conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, mail fraud for violations sent via postal service, and civil rights violations under federal housing discrimination laws. Between surveillance footage, physical evidence, financial records, witness statements, and Randy's confession, prosecutors called it a slam-dunk case with guaranteed convictions and substantial prison time. The smell of my morning coffee mixed with lingering scent of fire suppressant from my garage created an aroma of justice served with relief. As the sun rose over Willowbrook Estates, crime scene tapes surrounded the community mailbox area where Delilah had planned to destroy my life and collect insurance money. In 6 hours, I'd be sitting in my courtroom and Delilah would discover that karma sometimes wears judicial robes and sits behind a federal bench. The hunt was over. Justice was about to be served. Monday, 2 p.m., initial arraignment hearing in my own courtroom. I sat behind the judge's bench in official robes, reviewing the afternoon docket with the same professional composure I'd maintained for 15 years. Case number 247. People versus Delilah Harrington and Randolph Morrison. Conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, mail fraud, civil rights violations. The authoritative bang of my gavel calling the afternoon session to order echoed through the courtroom. Court is now in session, the Honorable Judge Marcus Thornfield presiding. Delilah entered in shackles and orange jumpsuit flanked by federal marshals. Her eyes swept the courtroom out of habit, then landed on the judge's bench where I sat in official robes. The exact moment of recognition was captured by court cameras. Her face cycling through confusion, recognition, horror, and the dawning realization that she was facing the very person she'd tried to destroy. The smooth weight of the gavel in my hand helped maintain perfect judicial composure while watching my former tormentor's world collapse in real time. Her legs literally buckled. She grabbed the defendant's table for support, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the terror spreading across her face as she understood her situation. The sharp gasp that echoed through the courtroom came from spectators, including media representatives, witnessing the moment when petty suburban tyranny met federal justice. Despite the personal history, I followed judicial protocol with surgical precision. The defendant will state her name for the record. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper. When asked to repeat herself, her voice cracked like breaking glass. Delilah Harrington. The federal prosecutor read charges in detail. Conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, mail fraud, civil rights violations. Each charge carried 5 to 20 years in federal prison. The mathematical reality of potential life sentences hung in the courtroom air like incense at a funeral. The sterile air of the courtroom mixed with Delilah's fierce sweat, detectable even from the judge's bench. The distinctive smell of consequences finally arriving after years of avoiding accountability. When Randy's case was called, he immediately accepted a plea bargain and testified against Delilah. His statement, given under oath with federal penalties for perjury, detailed every aspect of their criminal conspiracy from initial planning to attempted execution. Sarah Martinez sat in the front row, live tweeting proceedings to her followers. Local TV news positioned cameras to capture every reaction from the woman who'd terrorized a neighborhood and targeted a sitting judge. The rapid tap-tap-tap of reporters' keyboards filled quiet moments as they realized this was the story of the year. HOA president attempts arson against the judge who ends up deciding her fate. Federal prosecutors displayed surveillance footage on courtroom monitors. The jury pool and spectators watched Delilah and Randy planning and executing attempted arson in high-definition clarity that left no room for doubt or alternative interpretation. The visual crescendo came when surveillance footage showed Delilah laughing after coordinating insurance fraud, displayed on screens throughout the courtroom while she sat in federal custody facing decades in prison. Following judicial protocol, I recused myself from the case due to obvious personal involvement. Given my status as the intended victim, this defendant will be transferred to Judge Wilson's court for all future proceedings to ensure fair trial and avoid any appearance of judicial bias. But before transferring the case, I addressed her directly as both victim and representative of judicial authority. Ms. Harrington, in your position as HOA president, you were supposed to serve your community with integrity and fairness. Instead, you chose to terrorize a neighbor and attempt serious federal crimes, including arson and insurance fraud. The irony that your intended victim became the judge reviewing your case demonstrates that justice, while sometimes delayed, is rarely denied. The crisp feel of official court documents as I signed the transfer order carried the weight of federal authority, each signature another nail in Delilah's legal coffin. The metallic clink of handcuffs as she was led away was followed by the excited murmur of spectators realizing they'd witnessed something extraordinary, perfect justice served with judicial precision. Within an hour, video of Delilah's recognition moment was viral on social media. Hashtags HOA Karma and Judge Justice trended nationally as the story spread across platforms. Neighbors who'd witnessed years of harassment filled the courtroom's public gallery. Many openly cheered as she was led away in federal custody, their relief palpable after years of suburban terrorism. Patricia addressed media outside the courthouse. The remaining board members had no knowledge of criminal activity. We're working with federal authorities to ensure full accountability and prevent future corruption. As I left the courthouse at day's end, still in judicial robes, I walked past the community mailbox where Delilah and Randy had attempted arson just 12 hours earlier. Crime scene tapes still fluttered in the afternoon breeze like prayer flags marking the spot where justice prevailed. The satisfied click of my car door closing echoed through the parking garage as I drove home to Willowbrook Estates, as both respected judge and vindicated neighbor. Evening News led with footage of Delilah's recognition moment captioned, "HOA president discovers her arson victim is her judge." Perfect justice doesn't just prevail, sometimes it gets perfect ratings. 6 months after federal conviction, Willowbrook Estates had transformed from suburban battlefield to actual community. Delilah received 12 years in federal prison on all counts, full restitution to the HOA and myself, lifetime ban from serving on any homeowner association, and permanent felony record. Randy got 8 years for cooperation, but federal prison time nonetheless for conspiracy to commit arson and insurance fraud. The peaceful quiet of my garage workshop on Saturday mornings had returned, no longer interrupted by harassment, camera clicks, or fear of sabotage. Just the satisfying sound of wood being shaped and metal being restored by someone who'd fought for the right to pursue happiness in his own home. Patricia won election as HOA president with 0 opposition. Her first official act established the Fair Housing Protocol, clear guidelines preventing selective enforcement and requiring full board votes for any violation proceedings. No more clipboard dictators terrorizing neighbors based on personal prejudice. The insurance company, grateful for preventing major fraud and saving hundreds of thousands in false claims, paid substantial damages for emotional distress and attempted property destruction. I used every penny for community improvement rather than personal enrichment. The smell of fresh paint and new lumber filled weekend air as my garage became neighborhood headquarters for basic home repair workshops. The same space Delilah tried to destroy now served the community she'd terrorized. I established the Neighborhood Justice Fund using insurance settlement money, a scholarship program providing legal consultation and representation for low-income residents facing HOA harassment or landlord discrimination. Sometimes the best revenge is preventing others from experiencing the same injustice. The smooth wood of handcrafted toys from my workshop filled charity auction tables each December, each piece a testament to skills preserved and shared rather than destroyed by petty tyrants with clipboards and attitudes. Sarah's investigative series on HOA corruption won a state journalism award. Her coverage sparked legislative hearings on HOA accountability, insurance fraud prevention, and civil rights protection in residential communities. Sometimes individual justice creates systemic change. Earl's surveying business exploded after his role in catching property fraud became public knowledge. Turns out there's serious demand for professionals who can spot boundary manipulation and document evidence for criminal prosecution. "Catching criminals pays better than measuring driveways," he laughed. Patricia grew from timid board member to state advocate for HOA reform, testifying before legislators about preventing power abuse in community associations. Sometimes courage is contagious when good people see justice prevail. The laughter of neighborhood children echoed through my driveway during weekend woodworking lessons, proving that garages can be community assets when managed with respect rather than weapons when controlled by suburban dictators. Officer Rodriguez earned commendation and promotion to a specialized unit investigating housing discrimination and domestic terrorism. His documentation of Delilah's harassment pattern became training material for other departments dealing with civil rights violations. My federal court case became required reading and judicial ethics courses about maintaining objectivity despite personal involvement. Law schools use the case to teach recusal procedures and judicial integrity under pressure. Willowbrook Estates held its first annual Neighborhood Unity Festival in my backyard, featuring my fully restored vintage Mustang as centerpiece display. The same car Delilah had tried to burn became symbol of community resilience and individual determination. The smell of barbecue and homemade pies mixing with sawdust and motor oil during the festival proved that community spaces serve multiple purposes when managed with mutual respect instead of petty tyranny. As I review new cases each morning, the confident tap of my gavel opening court sessions reminds me that sometimes the law truly works for everyone. When good people refuse to surrender to bullies and document everything for the inevitable day of reckoning. Property values in Willowbrook Estates increased after Delilah's removal, proving that good neighbors matter more than petty enforcement and that communities thrive when led by servants rather than dictators. The worn but treasured feel of my original house keys reminds me daily that I never had to move, never had to surrender, and now live where communities should work, with respect, fairness, and zero tolerance for suburban terrorism. So here's my challenge to you. If you've dealt with abusive HOA leadership or property management corruption, share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else recognize warning signs or find courage to fight back with documentation and determination. Hit that subscribe button for more stories about ordinary people who refused intimidation by petty tyrants with clipboards. Sometimes the system works perfectly, especially when you become the system that works for justice. The gentle click of my garage door closing after another productive Saturday workshop, followed by satisfied sounds of a neighborhood where everyone truly belongs, proves that sometimes fighting for what's right creates something better than you imagined possible.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.